It's great to be here. As Stephanie mentioned, that I am a product director at Indeed, and I'm going to talk to you about mindset and behaviors for effective stakeholder management. So I thought I would start telling you about why I picked this topic, right? To be honest, at one point, stakeholder management was my least favorite topic, and now I love it. So I want to kind of tell you a little bit about how that journey happened. So when I first became a product manager, and I was young, I was naive, I didn't really know there was such a thing as stakeholder management. Now, I had this expectation that I will work with my UX team, I will work with my engineering team, and we will implement these great ideas, and we will just solve customer problems after customer problems. So when I realized that actually there is this group of stakeholders who get to have a say in what I'm building, when I'm building it, how I'm building it, kind of came as a rude shock to me, right? And early in my career, it became very apparent that I didn't really have the skills to manage my stakeholders, to build relationships with them effectively. So, in my first initiative as a product manager, I was working to simplify customer experience. And I had worked with my UX team to come up with a new experience, tested it. We were super proud of it. Like I couldn't wait to launch it. But obviously, I had to get the stakeholder approval, which anyway wasn't sitting well with me. I didn't really understand why this group of people had to approve it. On top of that, there was this one specific stakeholder who said, no, you cannot go live. Like this is going to translate into more work for my team. And this is just not going to fly. And this conversation had been going on for a while. The frustration had been building. And we had a really heated argument in a meeting, with other people that ended with me in tears. Like that, I had kind of reached the end of my rope. Like, I don't really get it. Why is this person not letting me go live, launch my experience? And at that point, it really felt like the lowest point of my career. Like I felt like, I was miserable, I was stressed, I didn't really get it. Like, how can someone be against simplifying customer experience? And so I really felt lost. But in the hindsight, that was also one of the best things that happened to me in my career, because early on, it showed me that number one, stakeholder management is super important to be successful as a product manager. It really isn't a solo sport. You're responsible for bringing all of these people along. The second thing it showed me was I didn't really have the skill to do it. But if I wanted to succeed as a product manager, I had to develop that skill. Right. So from then on, I kind of became a student of this product manager stakeholder dynamic. Right. So I got some coaching around it. I observed other people I thought who were doing it well. And then I got lucky. I worked with a few managers who were really good at it. Right. So I got to observe them really from close to and adopt some of the things that they were doing. Right. So that's what I want to talk to you about. Since then, I have tried a few things. Some have worked, some haven't worked. So I really want to share with you my learnings. So I'm going to talk about behaviors, but I'm going to focus mostly on mindsets. And this is why. So when I started realizing that I have to get better at it, I started copying behaviors of other people I thought that did it well. It didn't really come naturally. It kind of felt like I was putting up a show. When I started working closely with the one particular manager who was like, really, this was her superpower, I realized it wasn't just her behavior that was different, her mindset was different. Like her attitude about how she thought about stakeholders was different. And once I learned that from her, then the behaviors kind of became natural. Like it became a lot easier. Right. So I am a staunch believer that if you change your mindset, behaviors and results would follow, right? So that's what I'm going to focus on. So let's get started. 3 mindsets to help you build strong relationships. So the first one is going to focus on when do you build relationship with your stakeholders. Now, I must say, I used to have a very transactional mindset around this, which is if I need something from you, I will approach you and I will try to build that relationship with you. Right? It's almost like waiting to dig a well when there is a fire. It's too late. Right? Somebody else also told me that if you are having a first conversation with somebody when you want something out of them, you have missed the boat. Like it's too late. And this transactional mindset kind of showed up in my behavior, right? So for one, I didn't really believe in investing in stakeholder relationship, right? I would set up time when I needed them. I realized that wasn't very successful. Then I saw, oh wait, people have these one-on-one with their stakeholders. Let me also do that. Then I kind of swung the other way. I set up one-on-ones with all of my stakeholders, which was a pretty large group. And it was a huge burden on my calendar. Like I was just running from meetings to meetings. I didn't really have the time to prepare for any of these meetings. So basically, I would show up in these meetings. I didn't really have a strategy. I didn't really have a way to add value for them. Right? So if anything, that probably backfired. Since then, this is what I have realized is a better mindset, right? Which is I want to build long-term relationships based on trust and mutual respect, right? Which is I want to look beyond what I need from them right away. Like I really want to have a longer-term view to be able to build these relationships. And as much as I hate to admit it, one person I learned this from was my husband, because I think he does it really well. He is somebody who takes a lot of time in building his network and nurturing these relationships. So I want to share a story from his experience. As you know, that last year, as you might know, India had a really bad second wave of COVID, right? So there was shortage of medicines. It was really hard to get into a hospital. There were no oxygen cylinders to be found. And during this time, both of his parents, my in-laws, got sick. And we were thousands of miles away in California. We couldn't really help them. But in spite of not being close to them, he was able to get them into a hospital only because of a doctor he had built strong relationships with. So not only was he able to get them the medical help, he would actually talk to this doctor every day to find out how his parents are doing, how could he help them, how could he help the doctor. Now imagine if he hadn't built that relationship with the doctor. Right? Imagine the first conversation being, can you help my parents? He probably wouldn't have gotten the same response, right? So this is one example that really motivated me that, no, I need to change my mindset around this, right? And once I changed my mindset, really how I showed up changed. So when I used to have a transactional mindset, I used to see my stakeholders as something, they're holding something of value to me. They're holding approval, they're holding information, they're holding alignment. And that I saw them in a very one-dimensional way. So I had to work really hard to change that and to be genuinely interested in people. Like, no, I don't care if you approve my next requirement or not. I'm going to build this relationship regardless, right? So, and because building strong relationship takes time, I realized I am not going to be able to do this peanut butter approach. I have to focus on a small group of people. So I had to be a little bit strategic there because yes, I did focus on people who could influence my product, who could influence my career, but I actually thought a lot broader than that. Like I reached out to people that I thought I could learn from, right? I reached out to peers whom I really enjoyed working with, right? So it really wasn't just about getting ahead, about getting approval. It really was hanging out with people I liked and I could learn from. Right. And now because I had a smaller group of people I was focusing on, I could make these interactions meaningful. Right. So if there was something going on in my world that they would be interested in, I would think of it and ping them. Right. So I would also try to add value to them rather than just it being a one-way street. If there is one thing that you take away from this conversation, from this talk, please let it be this. Don't see your stakeholders as somebody who's holding value or who they're holding value that you need out of them. See them as genuine people and invest in building long-term relationships. Because once I did that, stakeholder management actually became fun, right? Instead of stakeholders, I also had friends and mentors. It actually became a lot more enjoyable and enriching, right? So definitely, if you make this switch, the other things are going to come a lot easier. Okay, so that's the first one. Let's go to the second one, which is whom do you focus on or what do you focus on when you're engaging with your stakeholders, right? And I have to tell you, this is something that I learned when I was on the other side, when I became somebody else's stakeholder. So for most of my career, I was really focused on myself, my product, right, when I would engage with stakeholders. So then once this other product manager approached me, and he walked me through his vision and roadmap, and he made an ask of me, right, that I need your product and engineering team to help build this capability for my team. And to be honest, I really loved his deck. I saved it as a template, but he failed to answer the most important question in my mind, right, which is, why should I care? How is this relevant to me? Yes, I care about our customers, but I already have a roadmap to help them. Why should I disrupt this, my roadmap, to help you? Right? And that made me realize, wait, I do this. When I engage with stakeholders, I'm really focused on myself, right? And it shows up in my behavior. I'm very agenda driven. Like I have an outcome in mind. I'm looking for approval or something from them, right? So I advocate really hard for what I want. I don't really ask a lot of questions about them, what's important to them, right? So it kind of narrows the conversation up front, right? So I mean, when this product manager was talking to me, I kind of felt like, sometimes outside of grocery stores, there are these people who are supporting a cause and they want to tell you about it. They want your signature, and you try to kind of go a long way to avoid them, but sometimes you forget, and then you kind of politely nod when they're talking to you. It was kind of like that feeling that you don't know me, you don't know my values, you don't know what's important to me, and then you're giving me this spiel. And I feel like that's how I was coming across for a long time. And finally, personally, because I was so agenda driven, I felt a lot of pressure that this conversation has to be successful. Like I have to say the right things so that this person agrees to whatever I need or whatever I want out of them. Right? It really wasn't a very pleasant experience for me either. So now I think of it very differently. I think of it as, my intention is that I want to try my best to align our interests. So there are two things that have changed here. Number one is, it's not really that I am looking for a win for me. I'm looking for a win for us. Right? How do I make it a win-win situation? The second thing is, I'm also admitting that I can try my best, right? I might not succeed. This person might have completely different goals than mine, and maybe our interests won't align. It's not going to be completely in my control, right? So that also takes a lot of pressure off. So once I did this, my how I showed up, how I started approaching these meetings changed. For one, I was a lot more curious about them, right? What are their cares? What are their priorities? What do they care about, right? Because I was trying to align our interests. The second thing is, I actually listened to their answers. It wasn't that I was just trying to check a box to say, okay, I asked questions about them. Now I can start talking about myself. I actually cared about what they were saying, and I still advocated because my goal was still to make my product successful, but I was able to do it a lot more effectively because now I knew what was important to them, how I could align our interests, right? So this was something else. I feel like I noticed a change in how my stakeholders would respond to me when I made this switch, right? So I didn't really come across as somebody who was, somebody who was very self-involved, I feel like. So again, I would highly recommend, get to know your stakeholders. Yes, advocate for your product, but make it relevant to them. You will have a lot more success if you do it this way. Okay, so let's move on to the third one, which is, how do you deal with conflict? How do you think about conflict? Now, let me tell you, I would go to space to avoid confrontation, right? I am very, very conflict averse. So for the longest time, my goal was, I must avoid conflict. And I will also tell you that this is an unrealistic goal, right? The whole reason stakeholder management is a thing is, of course, there are conflicts. People have different goals. Organizations, different teams within organizations have different goals, right? So you are absolutely going to run into a conflict. What's really more important is, how do you deal with it? How do you work through that conflict? So I was one of my last initiatives at PayPal. I was working on launching something, and there was somebody in our stakeholder group who's she was known to be difficult to work with. And I knew we were not on the same page, right? I knew I wanted to go to market as quickly as possible. So I was like, oh, let's do some manual solutions. And my stakeholder was looking for operational efficiency. So she wanted more automation. I kind of knew there was a clear disconnect, but she wasn't really engaging. She didn't show up to the program meetings. She wasn't really responding to emails. And I was like, all right, we have our lucky break, right? She's not engaging. We don't have to really pay attention to what her needs are. Let's move forward. So we went ahead and built the product. But before we could launch, we had to demo it to her. And in that demo, all of the reservations I knew she had obviously came out, right? And just because she hadn't attended the meetings or attended the requirement sessions, that wasn't really a big enough reason for her to hold those back, right? And my team had worked really hard, evenings, weekends, to go to market quickly, right? Then to get this message, oh, well, no, your product is not ready, you can't go live, was very demoralizing for them, right? So eventually we were able to work it out. But that demoralizing incident that happened, that really was on me, right? Because I knew there was a lack of alignment, but instead of working through it, like I worked around it, right? And that really is how I was acting. I was choosing the path of least resistance, right? I was trying to avoid confrontation. And the second thing is, it's not that I was trying to make everybody happy, but I did have this fear that if there is a conflict, people would like me less, right? So then I would more so, I was very driven by either I have to support my product or I have to support this other person, right? It wasn't really conviction led. So now I see it very differently. I feel like it's my job to work through conflict and misalignment. I'm not going to be able to avoid it. I have to work through it. In fact, I have also learned that conflict can be a really good thing because there are people who are passive aggressive. You don't even know that there is a conflict. People who bring up that there is a conflict, that's information for you to work through, right? So I have started to see conflict very differently at work, and really got involved in solving for it. So now when there is a conflict, number one, I don't avoid it, I engage in it. I also try to engage with empathy, right? That I have I have what I want. The same is true of the other person as well, right? So I don't want to be dismissive. I do want to hear what they have to say. The second thing I have realized, sometimes the conflicts arise because people have different information or they're making different assumptions, right? If everybody has the same information, there is a good chance they will reach the same conclusion. So from my side, I try to over-communicate. This is the intention. This is why we made this decision. This is what's in phase 2. Like, these are the downsides of this approach. These are the pros of this approach. And I also hope the other person would reciprocate. And the third thing is, I lead with conviction. So as I was saying, I don't try to please the other person, right? Nor do I try to say, this is my agenda, I have to take my product forward and let me just do that. I kind of try to keep an open mind based on the information, build my conviction. And if that conviction is that I don't agree with the stakeholder, right, I lead with that, right? So I try to do the right thing rather than support my product or make somebody else happy, right? So that's going to be my third mindset change that I will suggest to you. Think of conflict as your friend. It's your opportunity to figure out where there is a disconnect and solve for it. Okay, so to quickly go over the 3 things again. The number one, the most important one is move away from the transactional mindset. Really look to build long-term relationships. Second one is try to align your interests. Like, it's not just about your priorities. You will have the most success if it's about their priorities as well, if you can find the overlap. And finally, when there is a conflict or misalignment, lean in. As scary, as uncomfortable that is, that's what's going to help you solve for it, not avoiding it. So I want to just share this with you that, as I told you through my story, I was not good at stakeholder management. But after a few years of that incident with the stakeholder, we turned our relationship around, right? Today, she is one of my biggest mentors and advocates. She was gracious enough to give me a second chance, right? And I was thankfully smart enough to know that I'm not going to get several such chances. I do need to make things right with her, right? And I can tell you, if I can turn this around, so can you. So see it as an experiment, right? Like learn from different people, experiment different things. Not everything is going to work, but eventually you will get better, right? So, and eventually you will start enjoying it. You will start seeing it as a study of people and how do you influence different people? How do you get along with different type of people? So it actually ends up becoming fun. It ends up becoming like a fun activity and experiment. So I know I want to leave room for questions. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I also have a podcast for women in tech. You can check it out. It's called Unseen Battles with Parul Goel. All right. So Mahip, do I turn it over to you for questions? Can you guys hear me? Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. All
Let's
right.
stop sharing.
Let's see. So if everyone could put their questions in the chat for Q&A, and then we can start answering them.
Yes, please. I'm back. Sorry, I had a technical bit there. So Parul, thank you. That was quite informative. My first question. I did catch that this has been a journey for you. You did hint at it. You did specifically talk about it, that you acquired these mindsets. They came as a result of your experiences. They came as a result of the interactions that you had with your mentors. My first question is, how do we seek such experiences? How have you sought out such experiences, right? It's fair to acknowledge that we are not getting there on day one. Could you talk about the journey? Could you talk about what should we be looking at as mentoring opportunities or growth opportunities as we seek to acquire these mindsets?
So Mahip, your question is, how do you get better at it?
Yes, in a way, yes. That's it in summary, that it is a skill that needs to be acquired, that needs to be polished. How do we get better at it? Where do we start? And what do we seek as we need to get better at it?
Yeah, so initially what really helped me, there were a few things that helped me. Number one was self-awareness. I think the incident that I talked about, really, things did really blow up at that point. So it was hard so it did give me self-awareness that I had a role to play there, right? So number one, I had the motivation to get better. So develop that self-awareness. I would highly recommend that. The second thing where I got started was really paying attention to people around me who I thought did it well, right? How did they show up in meetings? How did they advocate for their product? How did they, and I realized they ask a lot more questions than I was doing, right? And that's where I kind of started copying behaviors. But then really what helped me was getting to know somebody who was willing to share their process with me, getting to see their thought process closely really helped me. So initially, that was my manager, some of the managers, one manager in particular. And then eventually, I also ended up getting career coaching, right? And that was able to kind of accelerate my progress in some ways, because what happens with career coaching is I have blind spots that I am unaware of, right? And this person is a career coach who has a lot of experience, but not in the context that I am. She's able to call that out, right? So I think that was the third thing that eventually really helped me get to a higher level. And what did I seek? I was monitoring two things. One is the reaction that I was getting, right? If I was getting more support from my stakeholders, that was part of it. Was I able to build these relationships? Was I able to get their support? The second thing I was monitoring was how did I feel about my stakeholders, right? Did I move away from the transactional relationship? Was I genuinely interested in them? If they said no to something I really wanted, was I able to move past that and still have a relationship? So what was my comfort level in engaging with stakeholders was also something that I was monitoring.
Okay, thank you. That's very insightful. Then there is a question which comes from one of our attendees, from Sophie. She says, well, she thanks you for the talk, and then she asks that she has a tendency to be transactional, right? We all do. Often I'll also plead guilty to that. So what she then asks is, she's working on that, but her question for you is, do you have any favorite questions to start from a place of curiosity? Or will it just always vary depending on the stakeholders themselves or the audience, right? So how do you start to build that, that place of curiosity? How do you start to engage them?
That's a really good question, Sophie. And yeah, it does vary by situation, right? For example, so I'll give you two examples, right? If I have, recently, I started working with somebody new, somebody kind of the stakeholder, right? So to get to know them, I would ask very open-ended questions. I would try to learn about their area. What are your OKRs for this year? What are the biggest problems that you are trying to solve for? What are some of your challenges? Just getting a better idea of their world, right? So when you're trying to get to know somebody new, I think that just asking those open-ended questions is very helpful. Because that's how you kind of learn what's important to them. The second thing that I've realized, and this is both from my experience as well as observing others, the second time asking questions is super important is when there is a disagreement, right? Let us say I have a point of view and your point of view is completely different. So the natural tendency that I would have is to contradict you and say, actually, that's not true. Like this is the right way to do it. Instead of that, like being able to stop myself and ask, oh, why do you think that's true? Right. So like you're kind of trying to uncover what are the assumptions the other person is making, and also sharing my intent. Well, I am optimizing for efficiency, and that's why I think this way is better. Right. So the second thing is putting your intent out there and also kind of asking questions to uncover where they are coming from. So I know it's a very abstracted answer. I hope that was helpful. Or if you have a follow-up question, I'm happy to take it.
Yeah. So we do have one more typed question. And what we could then do is we could open it up to the attendees so that they could ask their questions directly. It just makes it a little bit more intimate, right? And I'll ask the one question that has been typed out. So this question comes from Adrian. She's hoping to transition from product marketing to product management in an enterprise, a B2B kind of a space. She is training as a mediator, and her question is, sometimes in interviews she is not able to present or to demonstrate that mediation is an important exercise or is an important skill in stakeholder management. She says that sometimes hiring managers just don't seem to make the connection between what could be how is mediation a relevant skill in managing stakeholders, right? So that's a question. I hope I did not butcher it. But if you could speak to that, from your experiences, you could speak to the relevance between mediation and stakeholder management.
Yeah, so you said the person's name was Adrian? Yeah. So, if you're a product marketing manager, I feel like you probably have a very good sense of, the landscape out there, the competitive landscape, who the customers are, what do they need, right? In general, I feel like product marketing managers do make really good product managers. The part that they have to learn is how to build the product, right? That's the part that's kind of missing from the product marketing manager. So, I know I'll answer your specific question, but I feel like you have a good trajectory in front of you, right? So if you're not being successful in some of these initial interviews, don't let that stop you. I have seen many product marketing managers make great product managers. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about about mediation in general. It's so funny. My husband is actually taking a course in mediation, so maybe that will be my opportunity to learn. But from what I have heard about mediation, it's also about a lot about asking questions, right? Helping the other, you instead of you giving the answer to the other person, you ask questions so that they arrive the conclusion on their own, right? And I feel like that is the key to stakeholder management, which is uncovering information. Um, so from a skill perspective, I see a lot of overlap between mediation and stakeholder management based on what I know of mediation. It might just be a matter of how you position it in interviews, right? So maybe giving specific examples of how you have overcome, how you have used your mediation skills to overcome objection from stakeholders. Examples of where you have changed your mind and they have changed their mind, and other examples where they have changed their mind. I think that might be helpful. So Adrian, again, I think maybe once we open it up, you can ask a follow-up question. I'm not sure if I answered it. And again, I would, if you have a specific question where mediation is applicable, I would love to hear it and answer any follow-ups.
Sure, Parul. In the meantime, another question popped up. This comes from Ming, and they ask. They again thank you for the presentation, and they ask, what if the stakeholder is an external customer, right? And then you have a limited opportunity to get to know them, right? Sometimes it's a function of the relationship. It's a function of the way the contract has been set up. So if you have a limited opportunity to get to know them, what are your thoughts on how to deal with this situation? So, and I would double click on that question. I believe it's an excellent question.
Yeah. So I can. So actually, let me share what I think, and Mahip, I would love to hear from you as well. So you're right. There are many times with these stakeholders, your interaction is limited, right? You're not going to be able to get to know them as people, and there's really the world that surrounds them. You will be exposed to only part of it, right? So, for example, if you're working on a customer, with a customer, and they're curious about your roadmap and what you're delivering, what I would say is get to know them in that context, right? So a very typical scenario in an enterprise customer conversation is they're super focused on the solution that you're delivering. Like, will your solution do this? Will your solution do that? And one way you can get to know them better is moving them into the problem space instead, right? Which is asking them, so can you tell me a little bit more about the customers that you have? Like, what are the problems that you're trying to solve for? What concerns do you see with the solution that's on the table right now? So kind of move away from the solution space and have them describe, what are the problems that they're facing? How are they thinking about solving it? So I think you can gather some, what's important to them, what they're optimizing for through those answers. So Mahip, I don't know if you want to add something.
Yes, Parul, I would love to. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. I will talk about a recent time. I was just, completing a project with Ernst & Young, and they had a very important client, right? The engagement just went outside of the project to many studies that they had done with them on the consulting side, and so there was that formality in the relationship, right? So I entered this this chart situation, and just like you articulated it, I spent time on the problem space, right? I opened up with a thought of my own. I told them that I truly believe in building the product which will solve the customer problem. And this is just not a cliche for me. I truly believe that I should do that.
Yeah.
And if I have to do that, I have to understand your problems better, right? So without risking a solution, without getting into arguments about whether solution A is better or B is better, or we should be looking at C, I said, could you please give me some more of your time? Right now, this is not something that the business development team couldn't argue with. This is something that the client also welcomed, right? So I started from there, and as they started talking about the problems, they would also open up, and you have to look for those opportunities. They would also open up about their own frustrations, their challenges in dealing, and you got to latch on to those moments, right? So I believe you articulated it really well and try to understand more of the problem space without understanding, without volunteering solutions or getting tied there. Uh, just asking them to articulate their problems, just asking them to share their frustrations, what their clients want in turn, I think is a good start, right? And you're able to form enough of a relationship from there, to get on. Yeah.
Something else,
So
Mahip, you said, which is important. So, sometimes customers can be impatient, right? So,
mhm,
they might be like, why are you asking all of those questions? So calling your intention explicitly, calling out your intention that, listen, I want to make sure we build the best possible solution for you. Like I want to make sure we use your time judiciously. So it would really help me to help you if we were to talk about problem statement a little bit. Right. So
yeah.
just tie what the questions that you are asking to how it would help them eventually. That also is kind of hard to argue with.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But I mean, to Ming's question, definitely chart. It's a skill that I have developed over a period of time. I don't think at the very beginning of my career as a product manager, I could be thrown into a situation and be expected to be successful there. And one more thing that I will add. Parul said that during her presentation, have the strength of your conviction.
Yeah.
You are there to build a better product. You are there to solve the problem for them and for your own company. Always have that conviction, right? I mean, that's a skill, that's a secret sauce that every product manager has. So come from that conviction that, look, we are in this together. We understand that the situation is charred. We understand that we have a formality which keeps us at an arm's length, but we are in this together, right? And often they wouldn't want to argue with that.
With that, very well put.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. So with that, Stephanie, we would probably want to open it up to live questions. So folks, if you have a question, we would welcome you to raise your hand so that you can ask away directly. And for any of the attendees who presented their questions, thank you so much. If you have follow-ups, you can ask those at this time. So as we are prepping for our attendees to ask the questions, uh, Parul, another question about engaging stakeholders,
Mm-hmm.
and that has to do with building trust, right? Well, it is very nice to be able to form that
Yeah.
relationship with them, but you got to build trust.
Yeah.
What are your perspectives on that? Well, of course, successful product delivery is a great
Yeah.
way to build trust. What else have you done in your experiences to build trust with the stakeholders?
So that's a really important thing that you're calling out, Mahip, right? The whole point of getting to know them as people and letting them to get to know you as people is to build that trust. And really you start with small things, right? Which is follow through. If in the meeting you said you will send something to them, send something to them. Being transparent, right? A lot of product managers, especially earlier career product managers, they are scared to deliver the bad news, right? So if a stakeholder is asking you for something and you know that your product is not going to deliver it, you can be vague about it. But actually that kind of transparency can build trust over time, right? Being very clear about where you're not going to be able to meet those expectations. And in general, having these difficult conversations, willingness to work through conflict also builds trust, right? Because then I can trust the other person that if there is a misalignment, they will speak up instead of letting me assume that, oh yeah, we are going to get everything we want or we are aligned. So I also think that, just engaging in conflict is also a way to build trust. People respect you more if you're willing to have those direct conversations. But start with the easy stuff. Start with following through on what you said you would do. Start with keeping them in the loop as relevant information becomes available.
Okay. Any thoughts on stakeholder management depending on the size of the company or the stage that the company is in? Will the principles that you shared, would they have to be tweaked or adjusted to whether it's a startup or a mid-scale company or one of the giants?
That's a really good question, Mahip. Now, most of my experience has been in larger companies. Yeah, most of I have to say that my experience has been, where I had like 20 to 30 group of stakeholders, 20 to 30 stakeholders that I had to bring along. As I think themselves or the mindset would change. Some of them might be easier to implement than others. For example, getting to know your stakeholders might be much easier in a smaller setting than in a larger setting. But actually, I would love to hear from you, Stephanie, or anybody else who has worked for a startup or a smaller company and has tried them, what their experience has been.
If anything, I would say, since we are closer in a startup, you have fewer layers to hide, behind. I think these principles are on steroids. I think these principles are even more relevant, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I would say, I would agree with you. I would say they are relevant in any size of company. And Stephanie, your take on this before we we have a question from Adrian after that. So Stephanie, your take, please.
I think at smaller companies, I think the interaction is, it's more easy to interact with those in the higher up positions.
Yeah.
It's easier to communicate with them. There's sometimes a quicker line to communicate any kind of issues and problems. Whereas sometimes in a larger company, you have to go through like the steps through a manager, through a director, if you want to have a question to someone higher up.
That's true. You can have a more of an influence directly in a smaller company. That's true. Yeah. All right. Should we get to Adrian's question?
Yes, please. I think she's been patiently.
No, you guys are great. I really appreciate everything that you have shared. So thank you. Just to follow up with my last question. So I have certified in kind of a new form of mediation. It's called neuromediation, and it focuses more on empathy and really identifying the problem through asking questions and active listening with more of like a psychological based approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked more in smaller companies. I live in a rural area and have kind of tapped into the closest metropolitan area, but I'm really wanting to transition, like I said, away from that product marketing, and I'm trying to fill the gaps in those skill sets to be able to be more in a tech position. But I guess the hardest thing I'm having is to hiring managers, like they don't know about mediation. And when I hear you talking, like everything that you were saying tonight, I'm like, this is neuromediation. It's every aspect of it, with like helping to really ask questions to really find the root of the problem versus what's on the surface level, and being able to create safety in the environment for them to like be open about what their objectives are. And so I feel like that's very transferable into this space, and I use it a ton, even just with empathy mapping and product marketing. But I think the harder thing is there's not a lot of awareness, which I was surprised about. There's not a lot of awareness as to what mediation really is within hiring managers or product managers. And so I'm trying to figure out how I can best articulate that early on, because a lot of times, like, I'm not even making it past like ATS systems, and so just to give you more information on that.
Yeah, no, Adrian, I completely agree that mediation skills sound super transferable. And a challenge, as you called out, is most people in the industry wouldn't really know what mediation entails. So I think you might have more luck by sharing. And I think, I think so do you mention mediation in your resume?
I have it like as volunteer, and I show it as a certification, but okay. I'm not talking about it as much like in CVs, because when I was initially talking about it more, they felt like it was not a relative industry. Like I was making too big of a jump. And and that just supplements, like I do that as volunteer work, but it supplements product marketing because of the empathy and like understanding individuals and so yeah.
So if you're not getting through ATS, I think that's a completely different problem, right? That basically means so what had worked for me, this is what I had learned, was to and I like, this is please take it with a pinch of salt, but I would say this did work for me, is you kind of take some of the verbiage from the job posting and incorporate it in your resume. And once I started doing that, I saw a lot more success rate in just hearing back from recruiters. So it does mean, spending 15 to 20 minutes updating your resume for every position that you apply, but I would say worth trying it. And then in interviews, Adrian, as I was saying, maybe mention that you have a mediation training, but then share specific examples of how you have dealt in your job situation, as a product marketing manager, how you have dealt with difficult stakeholders, because I think that might resonate more with the hiring managers or interviewers than the fact that you have mediation skills.
Okay, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
I believe Ming had a follow-up question. Ming, would you like to ask a question directly?
Ming, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Okay, so
go ahead. There's a question from Ming in the chat.
Yes. And their question is, they would want to dig deeper on the answer, right? They were talking about external stakeholders, which we answered. And their advice is, sometimes the answer given by the external stakeholder may be superficial, right? They may say that sales is the problem, and then when you give them a solution, they're not interested in exploring further, right? So how to pierce through that first level of hesitation, right? How do you, I believe what Meng may be trying to ask is, how do you persist with, sometimes it's not easy to get that first answer. Sometimes it's not easy for the client to start talking about the problem space, right? Then how do you persist? How do you persist and dig deep?
Yeah, so I am trying to read the question and understand, because many times they say sales is their problem, but when given a solution, they're not interested in exploring more. So basically the customer is saying that, don't worry about the problem statement. Give me a solution, like just let's talk about the solution. Is that what it is, Mahib or Ming?
Possibly that could be one of the the ways that they may be brusque. They may not be willing to engage further.
Oh,
right?
Got it. I see. Okay. I mean, there are limitations to how much you can push someone. One way I can think of is, if one reason why they might not be interested is because they're not really aware how your solution would vary based on their problem statement. right? So if you can give them some hypothetical examples. So for example, if you are optimizing for go-to-market, then I would try to reduce the scope and just focus on the most important thing. And or if, let's say, if you're trying to, if scale is important to you, then what I would suggest to you doing X, Y, Z. So if you can maybe give them an example of how your approach would vary depending on their needs, maybe that might encourage them to share more information with you, right? Because it's I do think that sometimes people they have tunnel vision, right? There's a specific problem that they're dealing with that becomes their world. It's urgent, they want a solution right away. They don't really have a lot of patience to explore unless they see the benefit of it. So if you can push a little bit and share a few examples of how you can help them, it might work. It might also not work. Maybe they are not in a place where they really want to engage in that, and that's fine as well. I don't think at that point pushing them further is going to be productive.
So Ming says thank you. I think that's a very insightful answer again, Parul. So Parul, my last question for today is that we have many people who are trying to break into product management, right? Some of our attendees, and especially many people who watch this deferred live, they are wannabe product managers, or they have experimented with product management at their role, and they would want to take it up. They would want to explore that as a career, right? My one question on their behalf is, these principles of effective stakeholder management, are they only applicable to product managers, or are they applicable if you are a product designer, if you are a product marketing manager, or let's say you are somebody who's an engineer, or somebody who's from any of the other myriad disciplines, finance, what have you, and trying to break into product management? So your perspective on that?
I feel like these principles are really even, I think they're just true in life as well, right? If you are trying to build a large, if you're trying to build a group of friends, right? Just having genuine interest in people, or if you have a friend and you're not getting along, addressing that issue will help save the relationship rather than ignoring it. So I do feel like they can be, instead of stakeholder management, I could have even renamed the talk to, principle mindsets for building stronger relationships. So they're definitely, I mean, either the roles that you mentioned, engineering or UX or product marketing management, I think they are relevant in all of them. And if you are in one of those roles and trying to get into product management, you can absolutely, you have stakeholders as in these roles as well. You can apply these principles and use them as examples during your interviews of how you overcame friction.
Okay, thank you. Well, Parul, at this time, I think let me double click on the import that at least I got from this talk, and that is truly about mindsets, right? So instead of sharing just like a formula of how to approach this, I think you've shared mindsets. I think that's incredibly valuable. And for our attendees, whether you were attending live today or whether you would be watching this webinar later, in the true spirit of product management, we measure how we are doing. We want to bring you quality content. So we would really encourage you to fill out the survey. I mean, as a follow-up to this talk, we would be sharing a survey. Please do fill in your comments. Please do provide your rating. That allows us to share it with the speakers, with speakers such as Parul. And that allows us to be better. That allows us to bring you such content. That's your way to tell us what would you like to hear from us, right? Are there other topics? Would you want to explore this topic further in a way? So please, I mean, that's use that voice to be able to tell us how did you find this webinar. So with that, Parul, thank you so much. Love to hear from you. Love to get your insights. Any parting thoughts? And with your parting thoughts, I think we can call it a day.
Sure. No, Mahip, I just want to echo what you said. I can't really see any of you. So it's very hard to gauge, if this is helpful or not. So if you can use the survey to give me feedback, that would be super helpful, right? Then I can make the talk better. And if it was helpful, please let me know in my LinkedIn or as well, because I would love to know what resonates, what doesn't, how I can make it better. And if you try it, something works, something doesn't work, I would love to hear about that as well. But thank you so much for taking the time to attend this talk. And thank you, Mahip and Stephanie, for facilitating.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Stephanie, with that, it's back to you.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us. This talk will be is recorded and will be on our website, productsthatcount.com. So join us over there and have a great day, everyone.
Bye.